Well, it's January, and in the world of filmmaking, that means Sundance. So today on the Dolby Institute Podcast, we're talking with 5 representatives from the Sundance Institute, here to discuss the festival as well as the many year-round artist programs that emerging and established filmmakers alike can participate in through Sundance. Moderating this conversation once again is our very good friend, director, Sundance alum, and Dolby Institute Fellowship winner, Carlos López Estrada. This is another installment of our Satellite Sessions series, recorded as live webinars, which we're bringing to you in partnership with Anti-Gravity Academy and the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. Once again, we're extremely proud to bring this conversation to you, filled with real-world advice aimed at emerging filmmakers and storytellers who may wish to participate in the numerous resources the Sundance Institute has to offer, along with guidance on how to best position themselves to get recognized with the work they have to offer. Take it away, Carlos.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming back and continuing to show up to these. We're very excited about today's session. My name is Carlos López Estrada. I'm a filmmaker. I'm the founder of Anti-Gravity Academy. We are a production company established with the main focus of supporting emerging filmmakers in film, television, and beyond. In addition to hosting monthly conversations like this one you're about to see and hear, we'll be launching a couple of other initiatives soon, including mentorship opportunities and an incubator for first-time filmmakers. So please add us on Instagram at Anti-Gravity Academy and stay connected to learn a little bit more about what it is that we do. Quickly, we're going to talk about Satellite Sessions. In case you don't know what you're here to see, these are free monthly conversations with incredibly exciting figures from the film and the TV universe. Our previous panels have featured conversations with directors, with agents, managers, producers, most recently last month, writers speaking about making meaningful change with their storytelling. All these conversations will be available soon in podcast and video form through the Dolby Institute channels. We're on this mission to build the largest community of emerging filmmakers on the planet, and we're slowly getting there, but we have a long way to go. So about this panel, the Sundance Institute was founded in 1981 to foster independence, risk-taking, and new voices in film. Since then, the most singular voices in independent filmmaking and other storytelling disciplines have emerged from the many programs that the Institute offers. The organization has now grown to a team of 180 working year-round to maintain over a dozen labs and intensives for artists, as well as being responsible for the amazing Sundance Film Festival, which takes place every January in Park City, Utah. And it's one of the most influential film festivals in the planet. The festival has provided a major platform for emerging filmmakers to showcase their work, and has also fostered game-changing culture of artistic innovation, community, and diversity in the film industry. So today, we are joined by 5 representatives from the Sundance Institute, year-round artist programs, and from the festival, and they will share a little bit about the truly inspiring and groundbreaking work they're doing to support emerging filmmakers and storytellers year-round. So please help me welcome Paola Motura, Documentary Film Fund Director of the Sundance Institute. She oversees the Film Fund and all of its activities. Before working at Sundance, Paola supported production and grant making at CineReach and managed nonfiction programs for the New York-based nonprofit IFP, stands for Independent Filmmaker Project. Next, we have Adam Piron, Director of Sundance Institute's Indigenous Program and a member of the Kiowa Tribe of Oklahoma and Mohawk. Adam is the co-founder of Cousin, a film collective. Do you say cousin or do you use the word cousin?
Just Cousin's fine.
A film collective dedicated to supporting Indigenous artists. He has also been a member of Sundance Film Festival's short film programming since 2013. Next, we have Jandis Estrada Cardoso. She's the director of Sundance Episodic Program. Before that, She served as the Senior Director of Talent Engagement and Outreach at NBC Universal under the Global Talent Development and Inclusion Division. Jandias is also a recent recipient of the Golden Eagle Award for Diversity Impact in Television. Ana Sosa, Manager of the Programming Department at Sundance Film Festival and a programmer on the features team. In addition to her work at Sundance, she's the Director of Programming at the Sun Valley Film Festival and the forum producer at the Palm Springs International Film Festival. And last but not least is Elise McKimmey. She is the Deputy Director of Sundance Institute's Feature Film Program. She oversees the Directors and the Screenwriters Labs and the Screenwriters Intensive, provides year-round creative and strategic support to alumni filmmakers, and plays a key role in the producing and episodic programs. So thank you all very, very much for joining and taking time to chat with me and us. Just a note for all of our attendees, if you have any questions that you would like to ask your panelists, please write them down on the chat. We'll make sure to make some space at the end of the conversation to get through as many of them as possible. Just to kick us off, could we just go around the table, we'll call it, and could each of you just break down a little further the specific work you do within your department at Sundance and what a typical day may look like for you now?
The work that I do is to oversee the outreach, submission review, and selection process for mostly focus on US-based artists for our Screenwriters Lab, Screenwriters Intensive, Directors Lab, and a couple of fellowships that we also have under our development track programs. And then also overseeing the implementation and execution of those programs when they happen. And then in addition to that, I, along with my team, I'm very involved in the ongoing year-round creative and strategic support for all of our alumni projects that have participated in one of those labs or fellowships. And a typical day for me right now is divided between reading a lot of scripts and applications because we're currently in second round project review for next year's development track, which includes labs, intensives, and fellowships. And then also still doing a little bit of outreach for direct to second round submissions. We have an open application every spring and anyone can apply. You don't have to know anyone or have any prior experience. But in the second round, we also do some outreach to people that we've been tracking over time or are recommended to us by our alum, our advisors. So it's a mix of outward facing, bringing things in, and then going into my hidey hole and reading and watching work.
So you're busy.
A little bit.
Thanks, Elise. I'll pass it over to Adam. I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the director of the Indigenous program. What we do is we're a program that's been around since the founding of the Institute in 1981. Robert Redford, our founder, had always wanted to create a space within Sundance for specifically Indigenous filmmakers to tell their own stories. So, we like to say that we've been supporting 4 generations of Indigenous filmmakers and are currently working on identifying the 5th while also sustaining the others. But, I think similar to Elise in terms of some of the work that they do as well too, is like we have our own lab and a number of different fellowships where we specifically support, we give funding support as well and creative support to Indigenous filmmakers, both within the US as well as internationally as well too. Our focus tends to be a bit more on the US, but we have a good chunk of folks that are based internationally as well. And again, we do that we have our own lab. We have a number of different intensives as well as different fellowships and grants that, we give out every year. So, we're always kind of constantly reviewing, trying to identify new artists as well. And then I'm also, as Carlos had mentioned, I'm also part of the shorts programming team for the festival. So I know every year it tends to go up. I think like we had just closed the submissions this past year. I think Anna can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe we broke or we're like right around like 11,000 submissions for shorts. And so the team, the other folks on the shorts team with me and stuff, we kind of spend a lot of time, obviously, watching all those shorts and narrowing it down to sort of the final selection for the festival. But yeah, so it's a little bit about me and what I do.
That's a lot of shorts to watch.
Yeah.
How amazing. I'll pass it over to Paola.
Sure, thank you so much. Lovely to be here. So as you mentioned earlier, Carlos, I oversee the Sundance Documentary Fund and all of its activities. So I should say that the Documentary Fund is one of the two pillars that make up the documentary film program. The other pillar is the labs, fellowships, and artist support. So the Documentary Fund is currently 21 years old. So it was founded in 2002 with the funding support of the Open Society Foundations, which remains a larger funder today. And, I can give a little bit of the background of the fund. So so when it was founded, the fund was really quite unique and one of the first funds in its kind, and was mainly focused on supporting films tackling human rights issues. So this remains really like an intrinsic part of the fund DNA, but over the years, the fund has really substantially broadened its scope to support nonfiction artists from all around the world. It has always been a global fund, working on cinematic documentaries on pressing contemporary issues. So this is a question that we get a lot. So when it comes to themes, we're really incredibly open. We don't have any particular themes that, are our preference. And we're also really open when it comes to artistic approaches. So we really encourage artists to expand the vocabulary of documentary film, and we support projects that embrace a very wide range of storytelling approaches. In terms of my work, similarly to, I think, a lot of my colleagues, I oversee the submission, review, selection, and also grant-making processes for the Documentary Fund and all of our specialty funds. So the Documentary Fund, so we have a number of funding opportunities, but the biggest one is what we call our general fund, which is really the bigger documentary fund that we have. And currently it operates with one open call per year. We typically receive between 1,000 and 1,500 submissions per year. So yeah, it's a lot, but not 11,000 like the short program. So the open call is typically in the spring, and then we take about 6 months to review process. So we have a multi-stage, very rigorous review process, which starts with a team of external reviewer. So these are folks who are based all around the world and do the first looks on all of the submissions. And then our team sort of starts to kind of narrow down the pool. So based on the reviews that come back from the external reviewers, we look at those reviews and the projects that get the most positive reviews, that they move forward. And then our team, we have this internal phase, our team reviews those projects. And then at the end, we narrow down like a finalist group of projects that are presented and discussed with 2 committee panels, one international and one domestic. And these panels are made up by professionals that are really like directors, producers, editors. So a typical working day for me, I think very much depends on the time of the year and where we're at with our funding cycle. Right now, we're entering the thick of our review phase. So there's quite a lot of project review that we're doing. We're also prepping for this Doctober, which is essentially the new term that we've come up with to describe the month of October, which is dedicated to documentary content. So we're working a lot with our communication team. So watch out for that. So there's going to be a lot of documentary stories that we're promoting in October. And then I also manage funders relationships, support our advancement team with fundraising, and then I also provide ongoing creative support to our supported artists. So so I think that's kind of usually a typical day is kind of like a mix of all these elements.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. I'll pass it over to Anna.
Hi, yes, I'm Anna Souza. I have been on the Sundance team for 8 years now. I'm on the feature film side of the festival. And my focus as a programmer on the team for features is across all sections because we program very collaboratively. So to that end, while I'm a little more specialized in fiction and I'm part of the fiction team, so to speak, we all make decisions together towards the end of the process. So I'm watching fiction as well as documentaries. And again, across all sections, US, international, with also a bit of an emphasis in midnight and genre films. And in terms of like a typical day right now, we're nearing a deadline. On Monday, our features deadline, the late deadline, is coming up. So at the moment, just answering a lot of questions from folks over email, and people reaching out and just watching a lot, like a very large volume. To Adam's point, yeah, I think we actually clocked in at just under 12,000 this year. So it's a record.
That's right. I knew I was messing up on the numbers.
Yeah,
So 11,000 was last year. Yeah. So.
Yeah, just an extra 1,000, you know. And then yeah, and then we're still expecting a couple more features to trickle in and around the deadline, and just doing a lot of communications with filmmakers at the moment. So there's a lot of emails being exchanged. And then a lot of watching, and we have these team meetings where we meet as a programming team and discuss and go through the films we've been watching and share films with each other. But basically I'm part of the team that is in charge of the selection and review of the films that are submitted to the festival, and we kind of whittle down all the submissions to the different sections that comprise the program every
year. We'll come back to you in a second, Anna, with some more specific questions about your process, but we will end this round with Candice, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your program and your day-to-day.
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Shout out to my Cape familia. Just want to recognize all the Filipinos out there, for my papa from Pangasinan. That said, the day-to-day for Sundance Episodic Program, just want to confirm that everybody knows this is exclusively for the writers. We're a baby program, only 9 years old. So we don't have any director programming as of yet. And this is strictly narrative fiction. So no unscripted as of yet. So that's the program. We just selected our fellows this year. We're going to the mountain in the fall. So currently we are in feedback calls with the pilot drafts that they're taking to their creative advisors, who are showrunners or writing executive producers from hit shows. And that's what I'm doing right now, is booking their creative advisors and mentors and figuring out programming for that 5-6 day block that we're going to be on the mountain for the lab.
Okay, we'll move to another one for all of you, and you can go in whatever order you want. But each of you has had such a unique and very impressive path leading you to Sundance. Can you just share a little bit about how you think your journey and your previous experiences in the industry have influenced the way you work now and the way that you take in art and creative projects?
Well, my path to Sundance started a long time ago. I'm a bit of a lifer. I just started year 24 working here at the Institute. Wow. So a lot of my path has just been at Sundance. But, you know, what I did before this, I had an assistant job at one of the talent agencies, and I had a development job at a production company that had a studio deal. So I often say that those jobs, I was very lucky to work for wonderful human beings, but I often say that those early jobs were learning a lot about what I ultimately didn't want to be doing. So I think coming to Sundance has been wonderful because it really embraces the kind of storytelling and the kind of artists that I'm most interested in terms of the types of stories that they're telling, the way that they are often deeply personal, the way that they've really widened my personal worldview in terms of how I understand the world or try to make sense of it at least. And I think that, you know, in terms of influencing how I interact with the art, it's just really underscoring the value of it. And there's nothing that I love more than being in a room with artists and talking about story. And for me personally, specifically in the feature form, it's, you know, it's what I love to do. And, you know, the fact that I've been here so long should tell you that, you know, it's worked out okay for me.
You do amazing work there. Adam, we'll go over with you.
Yeah. I think like similar to Elise, I had to like do a quick calculation when she said that of how long I've been doing work with Sundance. But I started as an intern back in 2007. So I'm just about to finish clocking my 16th year of doing work with Sundance. And then, I think this will be my 10th year of programming with the shorts team. So I mean, it's like, Sundance has definitely been a huge part of like my, both professional and kind of creative life and stuff. And, similar to Elise too, like kind of in between there, like I've sort of boomeranged. I always end up coming back to Sundance, but it's like I've gone and tried something else and come back. And similar as well too, it's like I've done a couple of different jobs in other parts of the industry, and I was like, this is not for me. I'll go do this, or some other fields as well too. But I think for me, it's mostly it's around, I think, for my own background of just being Native American and seeing a lot of what Indigenous artists are capable of, and as well as like helping to support that, because it is a lot different in the U.S. compared to other countries. Like other countries have like film commissions or film boards or offices and stuff like that, where they're able to allot support for filmmakers, like Indigenous or not. But there a lot of the international Indigenous work is made through some of those. But in the US, there's nothing that really exists like that. So this is kind of something that's probably about the closest thing to that. So it's been just helping a lot of folks, and also seeing a lot of the work sort of unfold over that time period as well too. Like when I was an intern and stuff, and I'm still friends with them and stuff, but it's like seeing somebody like Taika Waititi go from just having done his like first feature and a couple shorts, and just kind of knowing him from when I was an intern, and then even like someone like Sterling Harjo, who went on to create Reservation Dogs. Like just kind of seeing all that work sort of pay off over this time period, I think is something that I've been it's been for me something that's really shaped how I perceive a lot of this work, and what happens when you get behind Indigenous artists and support them. And then also too, I mean, like I went to film school as well too for production. I mean, I make my own work, and also plays at different festivals and stuff too. So I think also for me, it's like also kind of working with other artists and like knowing like when to help, but also like knowing when to get out of the way, and just to kind of like help them, if they're sort of like going down some channel and sort of like vibing and figuring out like their own voice with certain things. It's like, just helping to create the conditions for them to kind of have those creative breakthroughs and stuff like that. So that's, I think for me, that's definitely sort of like the way I work, and sort of like take in art, but then also hopefully like help, artists make their own as well too. So
I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. So I've been at Sundance for about 4 or 5 years. Pandemic time is kind of like its own different sense of time. But I think it was 2 years before the pandemic, and then 3 years since the pandemic. And so I think my career trajectory before I started working at Sundance has really kind of spanned across various sectors of the documentary film industry. And I got into documentaries because I was really interested in finding a way to sort of like marry my passion for film to my interest for like positive change and social justice. So I worked both domestically, internationally. I started working in documentary production in the UK. Then I did some festival work. I worked for pitching forums. And then I found my niche with like labs, artist support, and then more recently and specifically like film funding. And I think the range of experiences that I've had have really allowed me to gain a deeper understanding of our field from many different perspectives, from both kind of artists to industry. So, I have a deep understanding of like the filmmaking process and the challenges that artists face. And, particularly these days, sustainability is an issue, and like our field and our industry, is in a particular kind of precarious state. So, but then I also have an understanding of like of what different sort of players in the industry, from like streamers to distributors, sales agents, are coming from and what they're looking for. So I think all of these experiences now have been incredibly helpful, particularly as I support artists and I provide strategic and tactical support. They've all been, just incredibly helpful. It's just been really helpful to have had those different experiences and just like have an understanding of the different perspectives and how the different sectors work.
Nice. We'll pass it over to Anna.
So I've been at Sundance for about 8 years, and I've been really outside of coming straight out of grad school. I started working in festivals almost right away. So for me, it became a bit of a process of elimination of having gone to Sundance a couple of years as a volunteer. It was just something that I knew I wanted to be around the festival world. Just it felt so mission driven, and so it felt like it was really aligning many passions that I had in terms of being able to help support and showcase new voices and just artists that were really taking bold strides in storytelling. So that was something that I always wanted to be a part of in some shape or fashion, and I kind of found myself at Sundance after working a couple of different places like Outfest and AFI Fest. Then for me, I think I saw a comment in the chat. Someone asked if I'm Brazilian. I am Brazilian. There is like a part of it that's very personal for me in the sense of I love the deep commitment that Sundance has to international storytelling as well, and how hard our team has worked to really amplify that and amplify our international sections alongside the US ones. And I think that there's just so much exciting storytelling going on in all over the world. And so that's something that has been really wonderful to sort of to be a part of and has been a big driving factor, I think. And it's part of why we travel to all sorts of places, doing outreach, taking meetings, and just making sure that everyone knows that we're a place for their film and that we want to see the work and that we want to support new voices. So for me, it's all been very rewarding to be a part of that work. I also I think in terms of other experiences and how they've informed, I've worked with multiple festivals, and there's something very collaborative about the way that Sundance's team works and the way that the programming operates, which I find also very personally rewarding. And I find that actually is kind of the secret superpower of the program in a way, and the strength of the program in a way is really that it's such a collaborative endeavor and that there's so many voices that are contributing to that process. So it's been really great to be able to be a part of that.
Thank you. And then Jen, if I'll end with you.
Oh my gosh, I've only been at Sundance for 2 years, guys. I'm brand new. Prior to this, I was 10 years at NBC Universal. So on the network studio side, they have 7 networks actually, and 2 different studios, but predominantly scripted primetime and alternative late night. I also led their stand-up comedy tour and booked writers and talent for SNL and Jimmy Fallon. And prior to that, I thought I wanted to be a Broadway director, and I was living in New York for 13 years, freelancing as a casting director for largely feature films, and got into the pilot game after like maybe a dozen films. I did like at NBC Universal, they would cast like 26 pilots a season. So a lot of pilots, even pilots for networks that don't even exist. And here I am now.
This is a question for, whoever wants to take it. But as you know, our audience today is largely composed of emerging filmmakers and storytellers, many of them with aspirations to participate in one or more of the Sundance Labs or premiere their work at the festival. This is kind of like a big question, but what do you think would be a piece of advice that you can say for someone who's just starting to make their own work, whether it's shorts, documentaries, pilot scripts, and are trying to create from a truthful place, also trying to find their voice and wanting to be noticed by people like yourselves, knowing that, many times resources and time is limited for when someone who's just starting?
Something that I always think about, and again, going back to like the collaborative thing I was saying and the collective nature of programming, but I think this applies so much to filmmaking. It's just finding your collaborators and finding the people that you want to work with and come up with. I think being able to really build those good creative working relationships early on will just like get you super far. And I think you see some of no matter what else might be difficult, if you have like your people that you have good synergy with and that you've kind of, again, been developing those relationships, I think that will get you very far just in terms of wherever,
you might be going, because it is such a collaborative medium, and it is something that I think should never be underestimated in terms of how much other people can help you and can take you further and can sort of challenge you and help you grow in all the right ways. So I'd say and that's again something that feels like it's accessible to everyone.
I think like maybe Elise might agree with some of this and stuff. I mean, at least from like the screenwriting stuff that we get, it's like, I think in terms of resources and stuff, it's like your limit's kind of like whatever you want to put on the page and like what you can sort of imagine, really. I think what I always try to encourage people to do is like, don't start thinking about like what's the budget for this as you're like writing, because you're just gonna like, unless if you're using that as a specific sort of exercise, it's like, I think it can be very limiting. But then even also like on the programming side too, I think it's like you can like, we also like don't recommend that people like, max out like 6 credit cards and stuff like that. Like some people do that, and it's like, I don't know how they do that, but like, but also it's like, I think it's like your film will kind of tell itself to a certain extent with how, with if you're doing it kind of from the right place. Like we've had films that we programmed on the short side that have been like one that was made for probably less than like $10, and it was like from this girl that was living in a Syrian refugee camp, and she just had a camcorder and just like recorded, bits of her life from her perspective. And then there was another one too that was from Israel. Like I want to say it was back in 2014 or 2015, but it was essentially the premise was that it was like a documentary, or kind of a hybrid documentary, where this guy had accidentally taped over a bunch of family footage, like home video footage that had, I believe, some relatives that had like since been deceased, and it was like some of the only footage they had. And he like recreated the whole thing like as he remembered it, with things like doorknobs or like water bottles and stuff like that. And he's just moving them around. But like by the end of the short, like everybody in the theater was like bawling because it was like so touching and stuff. So I think it's also like, I think there are plenty of ways to be creative in terms of how you're telling your story. And I think that, I think a lot of people ask that question of like, well, how much is usually like a Sundance film, or how much is usually like a short that gets in? And it's like, to be honest, it's like, again, it's like, there's no real answer to that. We get some stuff that is like, probably over $100,000, and we get some stuff that was made for like $5 million. And so it's like not something we're looking for. And it's also like, I think the thing that it sort of boils down to for us, at least on the short side, is like what the voice is, really like that's the thing that really stands out. And I always tell people that, where I'm like, yeah, it's really great that like you love, or you've seen like Tarantino or like David Fincher's film, but like don't try to make a Tarantino or David Fincher film, because it's like you're not going to make as good of a David Fincher film as David Fincher. You know what I mean? So it's like, what is like your story? Like, what is like, the John Doe film that's like whatever, you know what I mean? Like and I think that that's what people want to see, because that's what, really sort of rises to the top. And even the same thing with like, writing something as well too, is like spending time and experimenting, whether it's with shorts or even just with writing, of figuring out like, what is it that you want to say, and like, how do you want to say it, and how does it come natural, or like, what are some ways that you are trying to articulate something. And I think that that's always been the stuff that's really sort of like popped for us in programming. And then also just with me within the Indigenous program, is seeing stuff where people are really trying to tell something in their own way, which is, again, too, this is part of like what Sundance is here for, is to help folks that are, trying to say something that's like a little bit out of the box, or trying to like redesign the box, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah,
Anything
I would
else?
just double down on that. I always used to say to people, in terms of creating your own work, tell the story that you are uniquely qualified to tell. Doesn't necessarily mean your autobiography, but the one thing that you have that no one else has is what you are, your experience, your taste, the lens that you bring to something. And, don't be afraid to be vulnerable, to dig deep, to put some skin in the game, because that is the thing that'll really make you stand out.
Just reiterating everything that's been said, and we are really here to support artists fulfill their own unique vision. So that's what we want to see and hear. What is your own unique vision, and then I also wanted to really emphasize what Anna was saying about collaboration and community. Those are really key, and particularly like talking from a documentary standpoint. documentary filmmaking can be an isolating, lonely endeavor sometimes, and also it can take a long time. So make sure that you surround yourself by, a strong team and people that you trust, and that you engage in the community. And also that you work on other people's projects, because that is like an amazing learning opportunity. But also it helps with sustainability, because, often it is really hard to just, pay the bills while you're making your own personal film, particularly at the beginning of your career. So, just like embracing those opportunities of collaboration, I think it's really, really important.
Thank you. Those are all such insightful and inspiring answers. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is slightly connected, but lots of people are interested in your programs and in having their work showcased at the festival, but just resources, like everything else, are finite. And I'm just wondering what people can do to become involved with Sundance and make the most out of the resources and the community and the educational opportunities if they are not participating in a lab or the fellowship or the festival, just because I know that there's so many opportunities within the organization, and a lot of people may not be aware of all of them. So yeah, if anyone can shed some light of how to still be a part of this community beyond those opportunities.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on this one. One of the really fantastic resources that we have is called Sundance Collab. That's basically the Sundance Institute digital space for filmmakers, really of all levels. And there's a lot of opportunity to learn from experts or people who have been through the Sundance programs. A lot of the advisors and instructors on Sundance on Collab have either gone through our labs as fellows or have participated as an advisors. The offerings there cover screenwriting, both for fiction features and for episodic, directing, producing, people working in doc. There's programming there that deals with things like career strategies or professional development. And actually, some of the programming on Collab is even more expansive than the artist programs. We had recently a masterclass on writing for gaming, for video games. There's one coming up on writing for animation. We've had one around audio storytelling. So it's a really fantastic way to engage. And there's a variety of offerings. There's online events, there's master classes, which are like 2 or 3 hour in-depth, interactive craft online workshops. We have courses that come at an additional cost, but they're offered not only about a variety of different content, but also in different formats. There are some live courses where you all log on at the same time every week, but we also have self-paced courses. So you can view a lot of the instruction at your own schedule, but there's still opportunity to engage live with an instructor and get feedback on your work. And then we also have some briefer like weekend intensives for people who have a 9-to-5. There's video library, there's lists of like different grants and opportunities, not just Sundance, but sort of all over the ecosystem. There's a writer's cafe every Friday where you can just sort of log on and be doing your work with other people. So building that community, it's not just US, it's all over the world. And I think it's a really fantastic way to engage, and it's not as limited in terms of access to some of the artist programs at the festival as just because of the volume of submissions those receive.
Amazing. I know I'm seeing that a lot of people are already a part of the collab community. I'll move on to some. Thank you, Elise, for that breakdown. That was actually very thorough. Anna, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And please forgive me if this is a little bit too basic or reductive of the incredible work that you do. But for those of us who don't have a ton of exposure to what goes into festival programming, would you mind just telling us a little bit about the criteria you follow when you look at work for consideration for the festival? You sit and you play a film, and what is the thing that you look for? And I bet it's more than one thing, but if you can try to summarize.
Yeah, that's always such a tough question, right? Because really, like, I mean, the criteria, in terms of, let's say, eligibility is, we're looking for world premieres for US films and international premieres for international films at minimum. but realistically beyond that, it's really hard to narrow it down. And I think you see that even in our program and in just like the diversity of the stories and the voices that are represented and the types of films and the genres and, you know, the kinds of directors and the careers those directors have had. I mean, of course, we do end up playing a lot of first-time filmmakers, but there's also a lot of second-time filmmakers, third-time filmmakers. It just depends, right? Depends on the section, depends on you know, the year. And so it is very broad. And because of that, you know, it's hard to sort of pinpoint. I'd say personally, you know, and also because it's such a collaborative process and we're, you know, making decisions as a group. But I'd say personally, I'm always looking for something that maybe I haven't quite seen before, whether that's, you know, something that's moving or exciting or that feels fresh in some way. And again, that's very tough to pinpoint, but I think something that, again, feels authentic. I really liked what Elise was saying about, you know, the story that you're uniquely qualified to tell. I think that really comes across. I also liked this idea of redesigning the box. So like filmmakers who are doing their own thing and sort of blowing up the rules and you know, surprising us. Anytime a film surprises me, I really pay attention very closely because it doesn't happen that often because we're seeing so much in terms of the volume. So because of that, I'd say it's tough, right? Because we're looking at really, you know, just showing a slice of, you know, the best of independent films that we've been able to find in that year. And that's such a huge variety of voices and stories and perspectives across countries and genres. So because of that, it is hard to narrow down. And I don't mean to, you know, say it in a way that avoid the question, but it's just because I think if you actually, you know, if you look at the program and the films that we've showed, you know, I think it is hard to believe sometimes that, you know, a film in one section would also be the same as a film in another section, because and at the end of the day, we look for balance in a program too, right? Like we don't want a program of all of the same kind of film or the same kind of voice or the same kind of tone and genres. So that's the other part as well, is like it really becomes a bit of a puzzle piece process, because then we're also looking at, okay, well, what are the voices that are here? What are the stories that are here? And, you know, what are the films that are really standing out to us? And how do we sort of discuss all of these factors and come up with a program that's representative of what we're seeing in a given year?
And a little bit of a sad question, but what do you do when you find a movie that you absolutely love and for some reason it just doesn't get programmed, whether it's consensus or whether it's just space?
Yeah.
But as a programmer, other than just being upset, is there anything that you can do to support the movie?
You can definitely be upset and hold on to it for a really long time. Don't advise that, but you can. I think the reality is, you know, with the statistics, we're looking at 12,000 shorts. We're looking at around 5,000 features a year. Last year we programmed 104 features around there. And about 70 shorts, if I'm not mistaken. And so that, you know, those stats, I think, just should go to show that we're really, you know, of course, like the nature of the beast and the nature of like the work is that we're also turning away a lot of great work. Like we just are. There just isn't the room to show all of the great work and all of the films that we get passionate about and that we care about. So I think that's always just something important to sort of reiterate again and again, because I know it's so hard to get a notification that's, you know, a negative one of that the film wasn't included in the festival, and to take it as like a reflection on the film or the quality of the film, which it's not. So that's just one thing. I think in my case, I've found it really helpful that I work with multiple festivals. I've always liked being able to advocate for films that maybe don't make it in, but that might be a good fit for another festival. But regardless of that, because I know there's colleagues of mine who work with multiple festivals and others who don't, I think programmers are always kind of open and willing to discuss with each other like recommendations and films that, you know, again, might not have made it in, you know, for the festival for whatever reason, but then if they love a film, they can, you know, might mention it to another programmer at another festival when they reach out looking for, you know, suggestions for their program. So it's the kind of thing where programming is such a small world. We all sort of like know each other and talk to each other from different festivals and, you know, across different countries sometimes too. So it's because of that sort of interconnectedness, there's something nice there where I think that we can perhaps, you know, help support a film even in other ways. And then the other part is, you know, we're always tracking. We're obsessively tracking filmmakers' work. Like we have a crazy database. We just stay in touch with a lot of people. We're always, you know, folks are emailing us. We're emailing people and doing outreach. And so for us, I think it's also about just watching the next film and staying in touch and being like, we loved your film and we're, you know, we weren't able to program it, but please please share your work in the future and like be, you know, hoping that the next time maybe the circumstances will be different depending on how things go that year. So I think just maintaining that point of contact is something that we very proactively do.
Amazing. I'm going to move it over to Jandis, if that's okay. And I'm going to ask you about Pitch Parlor, which is a program that was launched in the last 2 years, right? And it's used to showcase fellows' pitches to TV producers, to studios, to networks. There's ongoing strikes, as we all know, and creatives have not been able to pitch since May, but we're all very excited to be able to get back into it. What are some elements of a pitch that really help distinguish the project for you and the other creative partners in the program?
Pitching is a skill in and of itself. It has nothing to do about how excellent you are as a writer, how excellent you are at any other elements in life, but pitching in and of itself, it's kind of like comparing it to like you can be a great actor, but if you're a terrible auditioner, you're never going to get work. You need to step into the room and not just sell your project, but sell that you are the parent to walk this child in through life. There's a lot of collaborators that have to sign off in television. It's not like film. As a director, you get in and your word is gold. You're not the king as a writer, but in television, you are. So you have to typically attach yourself to a showrunner and a production company, and then a studio, and then a network. And each of those have a mountain of armies saying why they could get this somewhere else. And you have a lot of convincing to do. So when you are ready to pitch, take that mojo and power and any ayahuasca leanings you need to give yourself the momentum to walk into a room and let them know and just leave it on the floor, as we say. Did that answer the question?
And yeah, and it answered the question and then so much more. But once you work with a writer in this program, I know you can't summarize it easily, but how do you help them prepare their pitches for them to be pitch ready?
We have a lot of rehearsal. There's the written script. There's the visual deck. In Pitch Parlor, we had sound effects. We had music cues. As I said, I'm from Broadway, so I like to go. But we also have a lot of industry mentors that come in and give you feedback along the way. We rehearsed for a couple months. In real life, you might never have to stand up at a microphone and ever pitch. You can be in a room that's 12 by 12 and a couch and have that as a normal pitching experience in the industry. But there are some core elements you got to get out there to make it clear and make it nice and tight to have your buyer asking for more. Who is this for? Is this on brand for my network? Is this within the scope of what our sorry to say this at the end of the day, but our typical large ads want to buy? Is this the aspirational show that matches up with the budgets we want to go for this year, depending on the studio or network or production company or other overall deals that are attached to this? There's a lot of factors involved, but at the end of the day, for TV, it comes down to character. And the most important thing for me in the pitch is, who are these people we want to sit down on a couch with week after week and see them suffer, succeed, and build and evolve? And what is this world? And can you make me feel that in the pitch? The most important secondary thing I would say is conveying the tone of your show. that's what you can't convey if you don't have a sizzle reel or you don't have a proof of concept already available as a filmmaker. You got to let people know, what is this style of comedy? What is this style of drama? Is it action? Is it character driven? Is it family? There's sub genres within, and you got to let people know what they're going to feel when they watch your show. So tone, world building, character journey, week to week.
And for all the people who are super excited about what you're saying, how can you submit yourself for Pitch Parlor? Is it by invitation? Is it open submissions? What's the process?
Unfortunately, as you said, it's a forward-facing, industry-dependent experience. We do it live, and we are not pitching to anyone right now. So
correct.
Not determined. However, in the past, Pitch Parlor was exclusive to Sundance alumni.
Amazing. Okay. Good to know. We'll be back soon. Paola, I'm going to move over to you. And for the documentary fund, which you are helping tremendously on, projects are able to be submitted at any point in the production phase, from early development to stuff that's already been shot and is in post-production. When you're reviewing these projects for consideration, how much do you focus on what already exists versus the potential of a project?
Yeah, it's a great question. The potential is really important because we are reviewing work in progress. So I would say it really depends. It depends on at the stage that you're submitting your project for. So if you're submitting a project in development, we don't actually, so I should say our application is made up by two different parts. So there's like a written part and then the visual sample. So if you're submitting a project in development, you're not required to submit a visual sample, but you're highly encouraged just because it's a very competitive process. So, and, we're working with a visual medium. So if we're seeing, it's always really helpful to actually have some, visual component, especially just to get even just, even if it's a very rough scene, but just to get a little bit of a sense of the characters and the world that your story takes place in. And then, but so if you are submitting in production or post-production, you are required to submit a sample that it's like a minimum of 10 minutes in production and a minimum of 20 minutes in post-production. And then if folks are, submitting a project post-production stage, usually they also will have, anything from 20 minutes to a full rough cut. We're not expecting anything to be polished in any possible way, but I think what's important, if you know that the current execution of your visual sample has some flaws because of a number of reasons. It's a work in progress and it may not reflect the artistic approach that you're ultimately going for because you haven't had the chance to hire a DP, for instance, or the editing, you may be edited yourself. So, it's not as good as if it was edited by professional editors. So I think what is really important then is to write what's missing or what we're not seeing in the written application. So essentially just tell us what we're actually looking at, how the visual sample differs from the creative vision that you are going for, that you're describing in the written material. So that's really important.
And can you tell us a little bit about the types of, you've mentioned it in your answers earlier, but the types of voices, the types of stories that the Documentary Fund aims to uplift from all over the world, but how your funding priorities are continuing to evolve?
Yeah, and that's a great question. We've worked very hard recently to really narrow down our priorities and articulate them clearly. So we are really focused on uplifting voices that have been traditionally marginalized and historically underrepresented. So we're very much looking at supporting artists who self-identify as BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and people with disabilities. We're doing quite a bit of work, particularly in the in making sure that the films that we support have fully accessible productions, and then that the finished film is also fully accessible. And then, like you said, we are a global fund, so we support artists from all over the world, but our international priorities right now are really focused on supporting artists who live and work in countries that don't have a robust infrastructure of support for independent film, as well as artists who live in regions where freedom of expression is at risk and regions of conflict. That's what we're focusing on.
It's very important work that you're doing. Thank you and your team. I'll pass it over to Adam, talk a little bit about your program and your work. And as you mentioned, since the very beginning, Sundance has done really important work uplifting Indigenous stories and voices. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities that you see in the short term for your program?
Like for my program, or are you asking more in terms of like the artists, I guess?
I think whichever you'd be more excited to answer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I mean, in terms of opportunities, I think like there's a lot that's going on right now. Obviously, before the strike, there was a lot going on like TV with a lot of, especially a lot of alumni of our program that were writing and directing on TV, and so I mean it's been a really good time for that, and there's also been a lot of alumni that are also like a bit more kind of in the sort of in the crossroads of like I think what people would consider sort of like art or like the gallery world and stuff making work as well too. So it's a really like interesting time right now, and a real sort of like blossoming of a lot of that work. We also recently just got we announced it, I want to say back in June, I think. We recently got a very generous gift from the Rancheria up in Northern California. They're a tribe up there. And it's like an endowment that will specifically go towards supporting Indigenous artists from California tribes. And part of that has to do, given the history of film, where like so much of film and cinema history has been done in California, but very little has been given to support or even acknowledge like the people whose land it's all happening on. So that's something that, I'm pretty excited about, helping to help foster some of those artists and to get their projects and, to a new sort of creative stage. And so, hopefully it's, it's playing the long game with that one for sure. So it's like, really excited to see what ends up happening with a lot of those artists and stuff. But I mean, I think for us, it's like, I would say in general, like as of right now, like a lot of the challenges are kind of like similar to, I think, what other folks had sort of mentioned. I think like part of it has to do, I think as of right now, I think the strikes have made it a little bit harder to some extent, just within the last couple of months of like being able to I think we try to connect a lot of our artists with folks in the industry and stuff like that. And it's been a little bit tougher because we can't do that, obviously, just under prohibitions and everything. But so, I mean, I would say that that's kind of the main thing right now. And obviously just, continuing to support our artists through this strike and just helping them how we can. So
great. Can you share with us one experience that you've had recently within your program that has made you proud? Like any accomplishment that you're like, I'm very happy that we did that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I would go back to sort of that endowment that we'd spoken about. It was like, cool. I think the largest gift in Sundance's history, which is great. So, and it was it's great to see, folks step up to support Indigenous artists and just to, make a commitment that also is like long lasting as well, in the sense that we're like, again, it's an endowment. So we're able to sort of like every year, be able to use it to support artists in perpetuity, essentially. So so it's great.
Wow. Oh, it's amazing. Okay, Elise, I'm gonna switch things over to you. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into your process in reviewing applications for the feature film programs, labs, and intensives? And just as a reminder to our audience, these are the famed screenwriters, directors, and producers labs, among others. What are the most important aspects that you consider in a candidate?
Sure. So it's a little bit different for screenwriters and directors and for producers, but
I'm sure.
in big picture, a lot of the core processes and values are the same. I would say that for all of our programs, we look at an artist's participation in the lab that they're participating in as the beginning of our relationship with them. We're really committed to remaining a creative and strategic resource throughout the life of the project that we're supporting for this particular artist. So for that reason, we have to feel very strongly both about the project, the piece of material, and the artist. So in terms of material, we are working with, usually both for screenwriters, directors, and producers, we have an external team of readers. These are always a mix of folks who know the program well and have read before. And in the case of producers, it's sometimes people who've been supported by the program. And then also we endeavor to add new people every year. We're also really prioritize making sure that this curatorial team is as diverse and inclusive as the cohort of artists we will select. And we're not just, churning out coverage. We're meeting with them on a weekly basis and really deeply discussing their reaction to things that resonate, things that seem to be challenges. With the material, we are really hoping to find distinctive, singular voices and visions. We want to see stories we haven't seen told before, or something that may sound familiar if you get the 1 or 2 second pitch of it, but there's something so specific about the voice or the lens through which the artist is engaging that it feels fresh. I think it's also important to us that the work feels like it has an urgency associated with it. Sometimes that's about the content, that the subject matter, something, that is socially or politically relevant. But sometimes it's because this is an artist who feels very much at the right moment for our support, really on the cusp of taking the next step in their career. And this is the thing that they're passionate about, and that's what gives it its urgency. There's a lot of reading, not just of the script, but of the application materials, both the development track application for writers, but also particularly the producer's application has a lot of pretty in-depth, almost like essay questions. People say the producer's application is harder than their college applications. And we really want people to be honest. We want them to try and articulate not just what they're looking for or what their vision is for their film, but why now is the moment that a lab could be particularly helpful to them. I think timing is a lot of what goes into our ultimate decisions. Not just is this something with a lot of promise, but is this the moment where our kind of support is really what's needed and what the artist is ready for in order to move a project forward. And then, at the end of the day, we come together as a team and try to put together something where it feels like everyone that we're supporting and every project that we're bringing both has something unique to get from the lab, but also has something unique to offer the lab, that it's really a diverse and inclusive group, not just in terms of the artists themselves, but in terms of the stories, in terms of the backgrounds. US tends to be, Producers Lab tends to be US, screenwriters is always a mix of US and international.
Amazing. And once you do select your cohort of artists that you're supporting, I know that it's hard to answer this question broadly because every program is so different, but what would you say is like the beating heart of the work that happens at the labs? Meaning, what is like, I know you work on multiple aspects of supporting the artists and the projects, but what do you think is the single most important takeaway that a filmmaker can have or can take with them at the end of the program?
I think that I hope the takeaway is that every artist that we support will have a new appreciation for and appetite for a really creatively rigorous process in terms of their work for the project specifically that we're supporting them on, but also that they'll develop an individual process that will carry on for all of their future work, and that they will sort of strike the balance between having a real confidence in their own personal vision, but also really valuing the community that is fostered at these labs and an understanding that it's not weakness to open up to collaboration, to feedback. Ultimately, the artists that we support remain in control of their visions. We don't require that or obligate them to take on feedback that they receive, but I hope that they feel like that puts them in a position of strength to be open and to listen to everything that comes their way. And then ultimately they'll decide, what really resonates for them and what might have been a fascinating suggestion from a really smart person, but is not necessarily in line with the movie that they're trying to make.
Those are such beautiful answers. And for the filmmakers who may not make it into the labs, once or many times, like myself, you turned me down so many times, Elise. What words of advice would you have for someone who's like really, really wanting to get the support, but similarly to programming, due to space, due to number, or just consensus, they may not make it into the lab?
We're not quite on the scale of the festival, but the odds are still pretty lousy. So what I would say first is don't take it personally. And that's hard because we ask you about your personal connection to the material. And of course, the work is personal. But there are just every year, there's so many more scripts and artists that we wish that we could say yes to. But the other thing that I would say is use it as fuel for your fire and use the process of applying to these programs as part of your creative process so that you do get benefit out of it, even if you don't end up getting selected. Take seriously, really, hopefully allow the application questions and the work that you do to get your script in shape to submit it to serve your own goals. And yes, it's wonderful to be supported by Sundance, but there are many, many, many wonderful artists and films, yourself included, who may not have been selected and who have gone on to make incredible films that we love to watch and that we're so glad exist in the world.
Inspiring now to get rejected. No, you're so good. Thank you for answering. Just to all of you, or any of you who want to answer, Sundance is a point of discovery for films and filmmakers to experience something new, something fresh, something invigorating. Could you tell us about an exciting moment of discovery that you've had in your specific area of work? And I'm sure this is a hard question because this is literally your job and probably every day you have multiple moments, but is there anything that comes to mind just in terms of that experiencing this really made me feel something powerful?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I feel that happens every year, right? That's what we're always sort of, mining for gold in that way of what's the thing that's going to jump out and feel like a discovery and feel like something totally fresh and totally new. I will say, I think it's always exciting when it's, you just don't know going in. I think, of course, we do a really extensive job of, again, tracking projects and hearing about projects, and literally someone can send me a cold email and we've never been in touch before, and that project is going to go into my tracking database, and I'm going to make sure that I follow up with that person later. So it's that easy to just sort of establish that rapport in that way. And so because of that, I think we actually are very aware of a lot of the films that are coming to us, particularly on the feature side, just because the volume's more manageable. So I think it's exciting when also, a film comes up through the submissions process that maybe we weren't aware of, which happens all the time too. And so it's nice, to go through that process and then be oh, this film, don't know this filmmaker, don't really have a sense of their background, but this is such an exciting project. And just to watch something and be reinvigorated by that. I guess maybe it's hard to give specific examples because I think, again, it just applies to different titles every year. But one that I sort of, didn't really have any expectations going in, even though this filmmaker has made several films before this past year was Fremont, Bapak Jalali's film, which now is doing an incredible festival circuit and winning awards everywhere. And it's just such a beautiful story. And it's so uplifting and surprising and charming and wonderful, and sort of going into that film not knowing what to expect sort of early in the process. It was just such a pleasant, beautiful breath of fresh air. But it happens every year to many different filmmakers in many different contexts, many different films in many different contexts.
Yeah. We I just worked in a movie in Fremont, and we used a lot of the crew, and they all just were like so happy to see the reception that the movie's having. So thank you for supporting it.
I'll just say it for us also what's really exciting and where we do a lot of discovery is just attending pitching forums and to Jenny's point is so important, like being able to pitch is like an art in itself. So pitch training is so important. But yeah, so just like that is like a major points of discovery for us, just attending pitching forums all around the world. And then what's also really amazing is, just going to the premiere of projects that we supported at the festival and then just really seeing them just like watching them on the big screen and just like see how they turned out. It's just like, yeah, it's an incredible experience.
That has to be like a weird, surreal, amazing thing.
Yeah, just one example that comes to mind is All That Breeds. We supported it quite early in development, and there was something really beautiful and unique about the project, but also the story was quite different when we supported it. It followed multiple characters, and then, when we saw how the film turned out, and then we just saw having that amazing festival run and just receiving all those accolades and then being Oscar nominated. It was just like incredible. Just really, I think those are the moments that makes us really, really happy. And also not that all films need to be Oscar nominated. And, there's just like so many unique, amazing films that receive different kind of accolades and they just have amazing journeys. And actually every year during October we do this like hidden gems sort of list, and so that's like something that we're also really, really excited about, films that have like unique paths and journeys.
Okay, I'm going to move over to our submitted questions, and I'll encourage you all to try to keep your answers brief so that we can get through as many as possible. Can you let us know where the best place is to keep track of all future applications / deadlines for fellowships and labs? I imagine it's a website, but is there anything more specific than that?
I think if you go to the Sundance.org website and click on the artist programs page, I think it might be Sundance.org/apply. On the right side of the screen, like it always lists the open applications.
For feature film development program, does it help to have a strong team applying together, such as director, writer, and or producers? Or how about talent attached?
I think that what I always say is when people ask about attachments, and it's sort of an annoying answer, but it's like if it's the right attachments, it can be helpful. But what I mean by that is not like fancy people who I know and have made lots of films. What I mean is if you are, for example, a writer-director and you have a producer attached and the producer is someone who shares your creative vision and is at the right stage of their career and has a skill set that complements yours and, has the bandwidth and this is a priority for them, that's a fantastic attachment. If you're a writer-director and you have a producer who's won an Oscar, but also has 77 films in development and doesn't really have time for you and isn't going to do much of the work that you need to move that project forward, it's not going to help. It's probably going to hurt because we know that you don't have the team that you need. What I will say though is that people should absolutely feel 100% comfortable submitting if they don't have anyone attached by themselves, except for themselves. I would say that probably the majority of folks that we select fall into that category.
Adam, does your team watch all the short films?
Yes, we do. And part of the other thing with that as well too is like we watch them all from beginning to end. So we're not skipping through them or anything like that. So we always get that question. But yeah, every film you send to us is watched in its entirety by a human being. So yeah. So again, too, it's like, it has to do like, at least with us, it's like a lot of like time management. Like everybody has kind of their own style of like watching and stuff. Some people just like to watch everything just on sort of like the list that we get, or like for me, I generally try to watch stuff that's like longer and then end up like at the end where I'm watching all the short stuff. Just because for me, it's like I have more stamina to like sit through the 45 minutes or the 30-minute ones back to back in the beginning versus like once I get to the end and I know it's the end, I can like it's just like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So yeah. So yeah, we're all pros. We all watch your films and stuff like that. So you know, don't worry about it. If you submit a film to us, it will be seen. So
there's a lot of questions about when is the best time to submit, and if there's any difference in being part of the group of people who are submitting right away versus if you're like late in the game. Are your odds different depending on your timing?
Yeah, I can help answer that. I mean, there's no difference in the sense that we're making the decisions at the end of the process. So it's more like submit when you're able to submit. I will say with shorts, we don't have premiere requirements. So I'd say just be strategic about that because, if you're rushing to submit a short and it's not quite finished, you can always submit in the spring when we reopen and like save on the submission fee and, play other festivals in the meantime, and that won't like affect eligibility. So that's something to just kind of bear in mind, just like for yourself and your own strategy. But for us, like we're very used to seeing works, especially for sure on the feature side, a lot of the stuff we're seeing is, doesn't have finished sound or color. So I think it just depends on like what the elements are, right? Like if you have like a genre film that's missing a, visual effects component, that's a huge key narrative part of your story that might be something that you want to time accordingly and ensure is complete in some fashion. But if you don't have, if you have like temp sound, temp color, whatnot, that's not an issue at all. What we usually just say is it's helpful for us to know what the temporary elements are. So just including like a title card or notes in your cover letter or something like that, so that we know what the incomplete elements are, is something that's super helpful. But again, we're making the decisions really very close to like the very, very end of the process. So submitting earlier or later doesn't really impact that.
Don't submit your monster film if it's missing the monster, is what you're saying. Paola, for the documentary fund, do you look at how much documentary experience we may have before? This is a narrative director who's trying to make their documentary debut and a story that they're passionate about. Just curious how much does experience weigh into decision-making process?
Yeah, I mean, we support a lot of first-time doc filmmakers, so emerging filmmakers. So and it's all storytelling. So often folks will go from documentary to narrative to fiction to nonfiction. So it doesn't matter if you haven't had like a ton of prior experience. In that case, it may help to surround yourself by people who have some experience, maybe like producer has some doc experience. But ultimately, we are really looking at why you want to tell this story, like the strength of of the idea, and these qualities, and if you are the best person to be telling the story, why are you uniquely qualified to tell the story, is like Elise was saying. So you shouldn't worry too much if you haven't had a ton of prior experience.
Thank you. Elise, how much do you consider the budget of the project submitted for the Screenwriters Lab? Does it matter if these are big, small, medium-sized movies?
So I always say, we support projects that are independent, both in terms of story and spirit and in terms of budget. We don't have like a hard cap, but the vast majority of projects that we support that go on to be made do so for a budget of $2 million or less. We have supported projects that have cost more than that, but as I said, part of what we do in addition to the creative support is strategic support and help, hopefully help move things forward, and that's where our expertise lies. So if you've got a movie that's maybe a little bit pricier for good reasons, and it's the kind of film that, can justify that budget in the marketplace, that's fine. If you've got, a $50 million period drama with big war battles and whatnot, great. I can't wait to see it, but it's probably not right for our lab.
Makes sense. Jandis, do you know of any other resources and or opportunities for pitching, learning pitching, sharing ideas, honing your skills? Sorry, that's like a 3-part question.
Another pitch fest that I think nationally is exciting for TV writers is ATX. They're one of our partners that we work with. Takes place in Austin every year. Also Series Fest, and for the international people, Series Mania that takes place in France every year.
Okay, this is a fun and also potentially sad question. Do you ever watch films for fun?
All the time.
Yes.
All the
Okay,
time.
great.
Honestly, again, like we go back to like the unfinished sound color. Like I love, like one of my favorite things as soon as we've like locked program is to go to the cinema and just watch like a finished sound and color film on a big screen. It's like so exciting. But yeah, no, all the time for sure. I think this is the kind of work that like, you have to be open to what the voices, what the stories are, what the artistry is. And it's the kind of work that you have to be passionate about. So I think that's a thing that I've seen that really, I think, unites a lot of us is like the love of film and doing it for that.
Okay, and our closing question. If you could time travel and visit any Sundance Film Festival premiere or event in the last 4 decades that you missed or before your time, do you have anything that comes to mind? Like, oh, I wish I had been at the premiere of this, or I wish I'd been there at the time this happened.
I would say the premiere of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I would have liked to have been at that.
Oh, me too. I love that movie.
We've heard a lot of stories about the premiere of Blair Witch Project. I would have liked to have been at that one, the Egyptian.
I was very young when that came out, and I was convinced that that happened for real, and that was the story being told. Is it true that the actors didn't show up to the premiere, or is that just an urban legend that?
That was my understanding. That's what I've heard too. So we would need to time travel to confirm this rumor. That's the other part.
Okay, yeah. Well, the word on the street was that the actors did not go to any of the premieres because they were, not alive, apparently. But they were. But, sorry, I don't want to start any rumors here. Okay, anyone else? Adam, you need to have a great one.
Yeah, sure. No, yeah. I mean, I think for me, I guess this would have been 94, 95 or something like that. But I'd be really curious to go to see like Paul Thomas Anderson's feature debut, which was like titled Heart 8, which was like it was like a project through the labs and stuff like that. And so I think I don't know, like I think it would just be cool to see like a filmmaker that like is so sort of like iconic now and stuff like that. But to see them sort of, I'm sure like just being a nervous wreck at their first like screening and stuff like that. And just like, I don't know, yeah, just seeing it and just kind of seeing that part of sort of Sundance history and film history sort of like play out as it was happening.
My roommate at the time forced me to do Kundalini yoga behind our venue for the premiere before my first screening at Sundance because I was a nervous wreck and I remember that time very dearly. I was shaking. I could not speak. Paola, Jendis, if you have one to share, if not, all good.
I should probably go with a documentary, but the first thing that came to mind was actually Beast of the Southern Wild and it's not even that long ago, but I was working for the production company that essentially produced it, and there was so much excitement about that film, and I know it was, I think it went through the labs, and it was definitely there's a lot of buzz around the film at the festival that year, and it's also a film that needs to be seen on the big screen, and I only saw it not on the big screen until that time, so yeah, I would have liked to be there.
I was there for that. It was at the Eccles and it was pretty amazing.
If I had to go back in time, and Adam and Elise, you might have been there, but if I could have met Taika Waititi like at like the birth of his fame, I would have loved to go back and seen one of his things.
It'd be a good one.
It was like 15 years ago or more, 25, I don't know.
Yeah, he kept coming back. I think it was like after Hunt for the Wilder People, that's when Marvel snatched him up. So
thank you all so much for your time. I can tell that so many people are so inspired to hear everything you had to say. So thank you. We'll see you maybe at the festival, if not in all the programs, if not somewhere we'll find you. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Carlos. Ciao, papito.
Bye.
The little guy.
Many thanks once again to Carlos for organizing and moderating another excellent and informative conversation, and to the Sundance Institute team for participating. If you enjoyed this program, please stay tuned. We will be bringing you more of the anti-gravity satellite sessions in the coming weeks. But if you'd like to tune in live and contribute some questions of your own, be sure to follow Anti-Gravity Academy online. You can find that link in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, please be sure you are subscribed to us, the Dolby Institute Podcast. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you will find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, thank you again for joining us. This is the Dolby Institute Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. Thanks for joining us.